There's a man in his late 30s standing in a dealership showroom on a Tuesday afternoon. He told his wife he was running errands. He is not running errands. He is standing in front of a 1999 Honda CBR900RR Fireblade, with both hands in his pockets, completely still, doing the kind of math that has nothing to do with numbers. He has wanted this motorcycle since he was 11 years old. He does not fully understand why he is here, but his body does. This is not a midlife crisis, it is not a phase, and he is not alone. Millennials, the generation born between 1981 and 1996, are now in their peak earning years, and a quiet but undeniable pattern is emerging inside used motorcycle markets around the world. Prices for late 90s and early 2000s sport bikes have doubled, in some cases tripled. The Kawasaki Ninja ZX-7R, the Suzuki GSX-R750, the Ducati 916, these are not being bought by collectors. They are being hunted down by men and women who had posters of them on their bedroom walls before they were old enough to have a license. The question is not whether this is happening. It is. The question is what was planted so deep inside an entire generation that 30 years of mortgages, student debt, and sensible decisions could not touch it. To understand it, you have to go back to the 1990s, not as a decade of nostalgia, but as a very specific psychological environment for children. The Cold War was over. The economy was expanding, and for the first time in history, motorcycles were being shown to young audiences not as dangerous machines or outlaw symbols, but as the purest possible expression of freedom. Television did something specific during this period. Films did it even more aggressively. Top Gun had already spent the late 1980s fusing the motorcycle with a particular kind of identity, effortless, untouchable, moving through the world on its own terms. By the mid-90s, that framing had fully migrated into the mainstream. Every action film had a motorcycle chase. Every cool character owned one. The machine was not a vehicle, it was a personality. Children absorb this at the exact age when the brain is most vulnerable to emotional imprinting. Developmental psychologists refer to the window between ages 8 and 14 as critical for identity formation. Whatever produces strong emotion during this window tends to stay embedded for life. The motorcycle was not just exciting, it arrived during a period when a child's brain was actively constructing what the future could look like. Then video games finished the job. Road Rash, Moto Racer, later Tourist Trophy, the motorcycle equivalent of Gran Turismo, which presented these machines with the reverence of a documentary, specifications listed in careful detail, engine sounds recorded from real bikes. For millions of children who had never sat on a motorcycle in their lives, this was their first extended relationship with one. And because the brain cannot fully distinguish between a simulated emotional experience and a real one during childhood, those feelings were stored as genuine memories of desire. This is the part most people misunderstand. They assume the nostalgia is about the motorcycle itself, the horsepower, the bodywork, the color. It is not. Research in affective neuroscience shows that memories formed during periods of high emotion and novelty become disproportionately durable. The brain does not file them as ordinary experiences. It encodes them as emotional reference points, moments the nervous system returns to when it is trying to calculate what freedom, excitement, or identity feel like. The motorcycle was the anchor for those emotions, which is why decades later, standing in a showroom, seeing the exact model triggers a physical response that bypasses rational thought entirely. The brain is not remembering a machine, it is remembering a self, a version of itself that was forming, that had not yet been told what it was allowed to want. Neuroscientists describe a process in adolescence called prospective memory consolidation, the brain rehearsing who it might become. When a teenager watched a film character ride through a canyon alone at sunrise, the brain did not just enjoy the image, it filed the motorcycle as a component of the future self, not a conscious decision, a felt one. The bike became part of the plan. Then adulthood arrived and repossessed it. The millennial economic experience is by now well documented. Student debt at a scale no previous generation had carried. The 2008 financial collapse arriving like a wall precisely when this generation was entering the workforce for the first time. A decade of stagnant wages during the years that should have been their most financially formative. The future self that had been rehearsed, the one with the motorcycle in the garage, the one who rode on Sunday mornings before the world woke up, kept getting deferred, not abandoned, deferred. And research in goal-persistent psychology is clear on what happens to deferred goals. They do not dissolve, they accumulate weight. The longer a meaningful desire remains out of reach, the more psychological significance it gains. The motorcycle stopped being a motorcycle. It became a symbol of a life that had been promised and not yet delivered. Every practical, sensible, responsible decision made in the years between 22 and 38 quietly added pressure to something that never went away. This is why when the purchase finally happens, the emotional response is completely disproportionate to what anyone watching from the outside can see. The man who tears up when the keys are placed in his hand is not crying about the bike, he is crying about time. He is closing a loop that has been open for 30 decades. What gets dismissed as midlife crisis is something far more precise. Psychologist Dan McAdams has spent decades studying how humans construct personal narratives, the internal stories people build to make their lives feel continuous and meaningful. His research consistently shows that when a significant chapter of a personal narrative is left unfinished, the psyche keeps returning to it. It cannot close the story without that chapter. Buying the childhood dream motorcycle is not regression, it is narrative repair. It is the psyche insisting on coherence. There is also something worth naming that almost never gets examined. Millennials grew up in the last era before digital life became total. The motorcycles of the 1990s exist at a specific cultural threshold. They were mechanically complex enough to feel serious, but analog enough to require real presence. No ride modes, no traction control menus, no connectivity. Just a machine that demanded your complete attention in return for its complete performance. For a generation now living almost entirely through screens, working through interfaces, socializing through interfaces, consuming through interfaces, the idea of an object that requires physical skill, physical presence, and full concentration is not just appealing, it is corrective. It is a return to a kind of reality that the modern world has made genuinely scarce. The motorcycle manufacturers of the 1990s had no idea what they were actually building. They were building emotional anchors for an entire generation. They were engineering objects that would sit inside the developing minds of millions of children and wait with extraordinary patience for 30 years. The man in the dealership is not being irrational. He is being exactly as rational as a person can be when they are trying to recover something real, something that was formed before the world handed them a list of things they were and were not allowed to want. The motorcycle is not the point. The motorcycle is just the only remaining door back to a version of himself that was built in a bedroom in front of a screen at an age when the future still felt like something he was going to choose rather than something that was going to happen to him. He is not chasing a machine, he is trying to finish a sentence that has been sitting incomplete inside him since he was 11 years old. And the remarkable thing, the thing worth understanding, is that the sentence was always going to need finishing. No amount of practicality was ever going to erase it. Some doors stay open for a reason.